We wanted to get really good actors to do the live action because many different animators would work on a character like Ariel, and we wanted to make sure there was a consistency to that performance.
Sherry Stoner was in the Groundlings, which is a group of improv comedians that came to the studio over on Flower Street.
We did a little workshop at Disney for the animators, sort of teaching them how to improvise and move around and stuff like that, loosen them up. But Ron and John must have been in the audience because they had me come in and audition.
Okay. What's your name?
Ariel.
Sherry was a wonderful comedian.
Ready, camera.
There's a big scene where Ariel is having this nice, elegant dinner at the palace.
She thinks the fork is a comb, and she starts combing her hair and seeing everybody stare at her strangely and realizes somehow I'm doing something I shouldn't be, and then takes the pipe and sort of thinks it's a musical instrument. Those things were really fun.
Just look at her!
Glenn Keane would have very specific ideas about how he wanted a certain part of the piece to be staged.
Jumping, dancing.
But within that, I would improvise certain things. Like if hair would get in my eyes, I would do that sort of thing, and that became sort of part of the character. Or if I was nervous and I moved my hands like this or something, they would put that in. So they allowed me to play within the confines of what they had in mind.
A girl rescued me. She was singing.
Josh Finkel was our Eric to Sherry's Ariel, and he also was tremendous and willing.
It looks just like him.
I would get a packet from Disney that would contain the storyboards of the sequences we're about to do, and then the audio tracks of the pre-recorded voices of those sequences. And basically, it was my job to put those two things together.
You look wonderful.
Ariel notices that the crab is on Grimsby's plate. Grimsby isn't paying any attention.
The comedy of the scene was already there. It was just me playing it out in a comedic way.
We did kind of a master where just the two of us were sitting next to each other. They had a chafing dish from the cafeteria that they used, and then they would just try different shots and improvisations of, you know, do it later, do it earlier.
Well, what do you say? Would you like to join me on a tour of my kingdom tomorrow?
Josh Finkel had a theater background, and he was comfortable with phrasing his movements and staging things for an effect as you would in a play. He brought a kind of a theatricality to the prince.
I'm telling you, Grim, she was real. I'm gonna find that girl, and I'm gonna marry her.
The original live-action reference process, they shot on film, and they were fairly elaborate. There was a lot of attention to detail in terms of if the character was walking down steps, they had steps built. They wanted to make sure that these live-action scenes were staged as closely to the way it was going to be laid out in animation. We just didn't have the budget or the time to do it exactly that way.
So what are we doing? Oh, Little Mermaid.
So we used video.
Ready, camera.
I lost her once. I'm not gonna lose her again.
Cut.
Our big sets were apple carts and risers. And then at the backdrop, there was a grid that's lined off with tape. That gave you a vertical and horizontal measure so that if you want to walk, you have a point of reference for animators to look at.
We had our puppets and our props and things.
The props were just, I think, whatever they sort of could pull together that was sort of lying around. Like, they got a puppet that was about roughly the size of Flounder to Ariel.
You want thingamabobs? I got 20.
Whatever worked, you know. So the shooting sessions were a lot of fun. There's some pretty silly stuff we used to do.
Right.
When we storyboard a film, it blocks out the broadest actions, but every detail isn't there, certainly, and the animators bring a lot of that to it. We would discuss it with Sherry, and we'd kind of walk through it, see how it looked for camera. And we had ideas, and she had ideas. And certainly, Glenn Keane was really inspired by Sherry.
We wanted her to come up with things that we wouldn't think of, or even that the animators wouldn't think of.
When she was on the rock, she's lost her voice, and she comes and meets the prince. I think we gave Sherry the direction. You know, you can't talk, you're trying to communicate all these things that happen to you, so you can kind of do it like charades.
They left it pretty much up to me to try and communicate like this and all that, you know, but then she sort of falls and stuff into his arms, and that was at a specific point. They had that all laid out, but that sort of thing was left to me.
Part of what live action can be used for is difficult to draw angles, complex bits of choreography, as well as ideas of performance and movement. You would think a walk is the most common thing, but the walk is actually one of the most difficult things to animate convincingly. Live action can really give you a leg up, so to speak.
And there's a good silhouette. It gives the animator a much clearer thing in terms of making a nice drawing out of that.
There's a term in animation called overlap. When something moves, something drags behind it, and then it sort of catches up. So if you have a cape and you twirl, the cape kind of keeps moving after you stop. Live action is very valuable for that. One of the other things that's complex to do in animation is when there's real interaction between two human characters.
Ready, camera.
And we did it very simply, as I recall, but it helped because you could see in these pivoting shots where the camera was moving around how to draw them, sort of to situate them in the boat, and that sort of physical thing, as well as the performance things.
Felt great.
Part of Your World was a really important moment, a beautiful song that Howard and Alan had written. When the time came to shoot the live action, that was one of kind of the key scenes.
When we shoot this live action, she's actually acting to playback of Jodie Benson's track.
Look at this stuff. Isn't it neat?
It was Glenn's idea, getting this pan around the grotto, which is very tricky to do in a two-dimensional art form. So we came up with this idea where we put Sherry on a chair and pivoting the chair down out of camera. We timed the turn on the chair so that when we combined it with a two-dimensional pan of the background, it really gave this kind of magical feeling of being in the round and being able to see that whole grotto. And then later we had the sort of key shot where she reaches up out of the grotto at the end. And that was a complex shot from a technical point of view. It was helpful then to shoot that with Sherry and to get the forced perspective as her hand came up into camera to really see how that hand would work and recede.
Some people, when watching Mermaid at the time, felt like it was a little more cinematic possibly than some of the films that came before it. And if that's true, I think part of that could be because of shooting the live action. It really did have an influence on the staging and the cinematography.
Wandering free. Wish I could be part of that.
That's a good take.
Yeah. Sometimes it's hard to separate Sherry from the fact that then you had Jodie, who was equally invested in the character, and then Glenn and myself and all the other animators that worked on bringing her to life. It's truly a very collaborative effort. The live action reference just gave you a good foundation.